By Brother George Warnock from tent to temple. We are in. We've done a study. We got interrupted. We had an intermission for a month or so, and then we did the review for the last 3 or 4 weeks now. It is, and we have caught ourselves all the way up into the Temple of Solomon. As I pondered my notes, kind of flipped through them. I think we have to do this in 2 parts, and we'll just leave it at that. Maybe in 3. I don't know. I think there's some things. There's 7 things that I think that's all Brother Warnock highlights about the Temple of Solomon. So this is just a quick sort of Reader's Digest here. In Brother Warnock's book, he doesn't attempt to really do a thorough sort of archaeological dig on all the components of the Temple of Solomon. This is a study of the whole journey of tent to temple. So there's some highlights, there's some things that he draws out in the book about the Temple of Solomon, about each of the temples that he's covering, which is 7. I added one, Adam, we've covered that. But here, so I'm not going to, for one, the Temple of Solomon is a very controversial topic to begin with for various reasons. One of them being simply there's just not enough information in the Word about the architecture, about the measurements. There's some difficulty in understanding the different measurements, right? Like, for example, that may be what it looked like, but that front porch area could have been a lot taller. It also could have been, shorter. So there's the columns could have been freestanding. So people like to argue about that. Was there a roof over them? Were they supporting something? I mean, I have my opinions on it. Just kind of listening to what I think the Lord is saying, kind of walking with the Lord long enough to kind of understand where his heart's at. But it's not nearly as important as to realize that through all of these pictures, right, God still has prepared something that has yet to be revealed in its full state, right? So we're not going to be looking at this from like an academic point of view, right? Like, we're not going to try to understand all the numbers and add them all up and all that stuff. And I don't think Brother Warnock does that in his book. I think what he's done, and again, you should read the book, he's pulled out and zeroed in on some pertinent to us concepts. They can be gleaned from the journey, right, along the way. So what I want to start with today, so I'm going to do a quick overview, so what we're looking at with those 7 things. So the first thing I want to mention is this was a special place, okay? Number 2, there's ascending realms in this temple. There was no such realms in the temple, in the tent in the wilderness. There was no way to go up. 3, there's abiding places in the temple. This is a permanent structure. It was not to be moved. It was not to be removed. It was forever. Right? The tent moved. This does not move. The Son of Man has no place to lay his head. Right? That's the tent in the wilderness. Okay? But this structure was magnifical. All right? Now, so that was abiding places in the temple. And the 4th thing we're going to look at is the Holy of Holies, and specifically in the upper chamber, we're going to look into the upper chambers. The cherubim of glory is number 5. We're going to look at the 2 brazen pillars. There's a lot there. It's probably not this week. We're going to look at the brazen sea and the lavers. And that will hopefully conclude the Temple of Solomon chapter. Okay, so we'll start with, I feel like I'm a substitute teacher or something, but it's okay. I mean, really, like, we have to eat this word by the Spirit. We really do. If we want to benefit from the study, we have to allow this thing to touch our hearts, right? And I think this is where it's a perfect leading to what we're getting into. So this was a special place, not because of the natural, even though it was natural, right? Like, this is the one thing I want to point out here, kind of focus for the Christians. This was the highlight of Israel. Like, God actually filled the temple. So there was a city on this planet where God's people could gather and commune with the Lord himself. Like, that he actually put his name there. Where by the time even in Jesus in that temple, just to look towards the temple was a spiritual event, an event of spiritual significance. Right? So we have to understand that there is nothing like that for the Christian right now, for the faithful. There isn't anything. The Christian is, we can build ourselves beautiful churches. We can do all kinds of stuff, the same stuff that the world will do to emulate it. We can paint chapels, right? But there is nothing like this for the Christian on the planet right now. There yet remains a rest for the people of God. So I think what's cool about the Temple of Solomon is it's a picture, it's a tithe of what God's glory is really all about. And so it was on a hill where God's name is, right? That's 2 Chronicles 6:6. The Lord chose Jerusalem for his name. It was not the highest hill, right? Now there's a fun part. It was not the highest hill, not even close. If you were to zoom out on Jerusalem and kind of what it looked like, I mean, just above Mount Moriah, you had the hills of Gibeah and all that land, and all those structures were higher than Mount Zion. And no, that's it. And I think what's cool about that is the message really is we don't look too high or too low. It's another dimension, right? God's basically saying, like, yeah, I'll give you the measurements, but you can't measure me, right? It's his name. It's his name. The strong tower is his name. You run into the name, and we'll get into some of that. It's another dimension. It's not a climb like Mount Everest or any other climb to achieve. It's a turn, right? Remember, Moses turned to see. He repented, right? He changed his mind. He altered his walk, okay, to look. And what happened? God revealed the plan. He revealed the plan. And we talked about that. I mentioned it. It's worth repeating. God could have chose any image, any phenomenon to start communicating and rolling out his plan, but he chose a bush, which is wood that's on fire that was not being consumed. And Moses said, I will turn and look to see why the bush is not consumed. And think about it. In its form, that is what God is forever after. After a people, right, wood, who can bear his name, who can bear his fire and not be consumed. A people on fire carrying the glory of God, not consumed. Could have used any image. Could have used anything. But that's what he chose. To say, this is all I'm going to talk to you about until it's manifest. The whole creation is groaning for the manifestation. All right. Proverbs 8:10. Receive my instruction instead of silver, and knowledge rather than pure gold. For wisdom is more precious than rubies. Right? This we're talking about again. This part one. We're talking about a special place. This is a special place. Now, for us, it's hard to talk about this, right? Because we're not like if we just learn about the Temple of Solomon. Okay, cool. Like we can, maybe do some debate competitions or get into a fun conversation with some smart people. That's wonderful. What does it benefit the Christian, right? What is it for the Christian? And I think for me, it's that God has a special place No, really, it's a place. Yeah, I know we like to say we're the place. Yes, we are. But whatever that place looks like, right, it was still God's idea to create man and put him on the earth. So we don't need to settle for anything less than that, right? We want to have the experience. Now, we're going to get into pomegranates later. But the cool thing about the pomegranate, it's a very fruitful seed. There's a lot of seeds in the pomegranate. They're all clustered together, right? But yet they're still individual, tightly packed things as one fruit, and they're juicy, right? It's cool. It's cool. It's fun. For wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire compares with her. Now, check this out. Sheba brought all of that, right? She brought silver and gold. That's, I have a note here. It's in 1 Kings somewhere. Yes, 1 Kings 10, right? She brought all that with her. She brought all that. She didn't care about it because in that account, right, when she met Solomon, when she listened, when she looked at all the servants, when she looked at his coming in and going out and his ascent into the temple of the Lord, there was no more breath left in her. He took her breath away, swallowed up in his life, caught up in a different dimension. But see, truly we have to turn to experience that. We have to turn. It's not about going up. See, like, we have to be careful. Because we all love God's people, but like Christians try so hard to be as cool as the world, right? Like that's even how we draw folks in. No, I know, and I understand, like, oh, is there something wrong with that? No, please, like, don't bother. Not what I'm talking about. All it is to say is Zion was not the tallest hill. We're not to measure our promises, what God's really after, what he's really going to unveil according to, please forgive me, Lord, the Dove Awards, okay? That's not like, okay, we can't, okay, because we're Christian artists, we're not going to get the Emmys. We don't want the Emmys, right? That's the worldly award. So we'll have our own award, but we'll structure it and base it on the pattern that's in the world, right? So God's hill is higher, and it's Mount Zion, and it's not even the tallest hill in Judea. You see what I'm saying? He's in a different dimension. In a different dimension. It's a hidden place. We'll get into that. A good name, right? Jesus. Now see, like, those were Proverbs, but now we have the reality. We know in Acts it says there is no other name. No other name. He's given us a name. So choose that name. Choose Jesus. Simple. Choose Jesus. What's your philosophy, Brother Nikita? How do we get a better life? Right? Oh, it's not about better life. No, it is. It is. It's about better life. Even through suffering, you choose Jesus, it's a better life. Wait, I made a mistake today. Choose Jesus. It's a better life. Now this is interesting, right? So let's follow real quick. From wilderness, right, we get the temple in the wilderness, and now we have the Temple of Solomon, a traveling structure to permanent structure, glorified, beautified structure. And then we had, truly, if you think about it, the only beautiful piece in the tent would have been the mercy seat. I see you nodding because you know what I'm talking about. It would have been God himself, right? And so you can, even Brother Warnock, the tabernacle is Jesus. It's true. Because check this out. Isaiah 53:2, he had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. Tabernacle in the wilderness, right? Now we hear accounts, and I don't have the scriptures, but we know for a fact, just reading through scriptures, there were folks traveling in and out in the wilderness. What are these crazy Hebrews out of Egypt doing over here? Yeah. It's not for me. Going to Damascus or wherever they're going. Yet when Solomon, right, when Solomon finished what he was doing, all of a sudden Queen of Sheba goes, I got to go. I got to go make this trip. I got to go listen. And he answered all her questions, and it took her breath away. Now, there was no Queen of Sheba went down there in the wilderness to talk to Moses, other than his father-in-law to straighten him out a little bit so he didn't pull his hair out, dealing with God's people, right? He gave him some instruction. So there's a change, you see? Nobody wanted Jesus, but guess what? Like I said, the world didn't want, be careful now, the world didn't want Jesus. But ultimately, when God is done doing what he's doing, everybody's going to want it. But there's going to be pillars in the temple. He who overcomes. There are going to be pillars. Don't jump that far. All right. Isaiah 53, it pleased the Lord to bruise him, right? Jesus. It pleased the Lord to bruise him. And the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. At John 13, this is what happened. Jesus knew the Lord, committed the whole thing into his hand. I'm paraphrasing. That's in John 13. And the work that is now finished, he wants his pleasure filled up, right? It pleased him to bruise him. That was just the beginning. There was nothing special about him that the world would want to look at it, but that's not the end. God's not going to take a back seat to anybody, ultimately. It does not yet appear what we shall be, but when he appears in us, we shall see him as he is, and every knee shall bow. I know it's crazy. It's okay, though. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. No, see, Christianity is not just like, we limit salvation so much, right? We just call it like, oh, you're saved, you have Jesus, you don't have to go to hell, right? And then whatever else, if all hell breaks loose in your life, it's all right because you still have that ticket out of hell. Are you telling me that's not true? Keep the ticket. But there's a second act, and then there's a third, and it's better every time. There's ascending realms in the temple. That's the next part. So he's filling up his pleasure. Matt 3:17, Mark 1:11, Luke 3:22. Jesus, his beloved Son, in whom he's well pleased, right? Well pleased. In the picture that kind of jumped as I'm thinking about this progression, right? Like God has something better, and it's hid. Our life is hid with Christ in God, right? As I'm pondering this, I thought about the picture of Jonathan and David, their final meeting. It was not their final meeting, but I think it was when they cried. And it said David exceeded. You like what I'm saying? Yeah, yes. But it said David weeping. He exceeded, right? He cried longer, and I thought about that. It's pretty cool because Jonathan loved David as his own soul. That's 1 Samuel 18:3. Yet when they parted, David wept harder. That's 1 Samuel 20:41. David's love was greater, meaning Jonathan couldn't relate, really, to where David's heart already was. God's love for us is greater. The thing that he's unveiling is greater than what we're able to believe for, than what we're able to draw up with our limited, even it's the most utmost skill that we could possibly imagine. It's still limited as far as God's love for us and what he's really doing in our lives is concerned. The catch is very simple. You have to believe it. And then the obligation is to suffer. You can't change the word. I can't change the word. It's like this word is not a very preachable word. Very, very few there be that find it. Like Paul said. I say this to me all the time. Like Paul said, lest I preach, my biggest concern is having preached this thing, I find myself peeking in from the outside. But he who overcomes, I'll make a pillar in my temple. Now I might as well get it out of the way. I think these things were freestanding. I don't think they were supporting nothing. I think they were pillars to display prominence, glory, strength. It's like somebody showing somebody off. That's what I think. And God could change my mind, but it makes sense. That's right. And so it is a picture here with Solomon. The Lord's love prevails. It's both higher than the hills and deeper than the valleys. The Lord has prepared something, an experience that isn't on the map for those who love Him. And we talked about Queen of Sheba. So, I mean, this is going to get real, but it's true though. Like, I don't know, maybe it just encourages me, but I think the crazy thing that's going on in the world right now is God is really challenging a people. I mean, seriously, we live in an hour that it's like that king who had a wedding. He asked all his church to come. He asked all the church to come. The Jew, the Greek, all of them. And the church has not come. And he's out looking for a people to furnish a wedding. Like, I mentioned this quickly last week. So Nehemiah 13:26, I was wrong. It wasn't in Ezra. It was in Nehemiah 13. He said, "Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin by all these things? Yet among many nations there no king like him, who was beloved of his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, even him did outlandish women cause to sin." Right? In this world, this is what happens. The rich and the poor meet together. The Lord is the maker of them all. In other words, this thing doesn't last forever. These are earthbound vessels. They're earthbound. That's just a picture, right? And so, this is what I was thinking. So, I think all normal men, at least one point in their life, guys, just stick with me here, had this thought, right? You think about Solomon, right? We think about how great he was. We also know all his failures. And we'll preach that. But I guarantee you, I'm just going to get real. I guarantee you, every dude who's ever been born, who's ever had blood, in his heart said this, at least at one point. At least Solomon had some fun. Now, hang on a second. At least he had some fun, but he should have kept it under control. See, that's how smart we are. No, it's like, 800, that's nuts. He's the king. Could have done whatever he wanted, right? Well, come on now, come on. Where do men fail? Every single day. All the Christians. Even the Christians. We got to get real. But see, this is what's going on. That's the reason we don't have any problems, right, in the church, because we wouldn't dare something like this, like what I'm saying in church right now, right? The church is clean out of trouble, isn't it? We don't have problems at all. Not with God's people, right? God's people, when they get married, they stay married, right? God's people's kids, they don't run around in the world. Not at all. Why? Because they're in the worship team. Right? Because we've read the Bible with them. Like, look, we have to be real. We have to be real. That's one of the reasons why kids don't mind spending time in the land. But the bottom line is this. The reason why I'm saying this is not a negative thing. It really comes down to, it's a revelation about ourselves, to ourselves. We have not tasted what God is really after. We really haven't. Because when we do, we turn. When we do, we turn. Now, I don't really know. I'm not going to stop here. See, we'll get religious and we'll bury Solomon and say, hey, we're not so, yet the real goal is to realize that there's absolutely nothing that can compare with what the Lord has prepared for the fullness of the one who comes out of the wilderness. That's for Brother Dale, right? The one that comes out of the wilderness when he's fully complete. It's a sight to behold. It will make you drop what you're doing. You know, on a elementary level, I always go back to what Brother David Wilkerson wrote in one of his books. When he dealt with a lot in his ministry. He dealt with a lot of folks that had lots of problems. And one of the things that he would say is, you know, you can't try to take a bone away from a hungry dog. But if you bring the dog some meat, it will let that bone go as quick as you put that meat down. It won't even remember it's there. But see, to us, these things are by faith. What we've done, I think, where we be careful not to make a mistake, is we try to emulate, right? Sort of sanitize the world and then offer it as like, hey, here's a Christian version of that. And it's never as good as the world. Right? It just never is. But Revelation 21, here's how remember we're talking about well-pleased. Here's how this whole thing ends. Revelation 21, 21, 22. Pure gold like glass, and I saw no temple. Right? Remember, Zion is not the highest hill because it's a different dimension. I saw no temple because the Lord and the Lamb are the temple. All right, so we can do ascending realms real quick. So in this structure, it was new to have, there was ascending realms, right? There was a theme of leveling up, right? So even just to get to the great court, you had to climb some steps, and then to get to the inner court, you had to climb some more steps, right? So there's always these degrees, and within the structure itself, with all the with the storehouses, like these things on the side, you can see, right? Now, I'm not advocating, by the way, that this is exactly what it looked like. I think for any of us to do that, it would be very foolish. But just understand the concept that there were ascending realms. There were 3 levels, right? And the priest court was higher than the great court. We don't know how much higher. See, that bothers us, right? We need to know. Even though God just tells us it's a picture. Just don't settle for what you have here. Because in this life, the rich and the poor, they get together eventually. The temple itself was built on a large foundation that would elevate it a few steps higher. The ascending principle is taught. I'm going to just read some of these. I just copied some of the stuff that Brother Warnock wrote. It doesn't need any comments, so I'm just going to read it. The principle is taught in many places in the Word. The 15 Psalms from Psalm 120 to 134 are called the songs of degrees, or the songs of ascending. They have been called the pilgrim songs, sung by the pilgrims as they made their way upward towards Jerusalem for worship and sacrifice and to keep the feast of the Lord in their season. And this is cool. This is how it starts. Consider this. This is kind of where we are. This is what I said, right? Like, this was a highlight in God's people's life. Oh, you disagree with me? It's okay, because watch. If we don't put on His life, just because we know all this stuff, we'll wind up just like them, except they did not have to pay taxes to some foreign king. They didn't have to wear masks. They didn't have to get vaccines. They didn't have to worry about somebody taking away their rights. They didn't have to amend the Constitution. The kings of the earth were coming to them for answers. So there remains yet a rest for the people of God. We can't be deceived just because we know something that's different than what those folks never had access to. Having access to something and having it are completely 2 different things. I'm not being mean when I say that. I'm being honest with us. Because this is more like what we are, where God's people really are, more like the cave of Adullam. Those are the ones that really love the Lord. The ones that really love the Lord, that cling to His promises, They're more like stuck in the stinky cave where people go to the bathroom. Oh, it's true. It's true. It is. It's hard to walk his life for real. It's hard. But there's a promise. He'll make a pillar out of us in his temple. See, this is, again, I'm going to say it again. The only way to know is to believe. It's like, well, how can you prove it? I can't prove it to you. He either made you that way or he didn't. Oh, that's blasphemy. You know what? I'm an open book. I have one shot at it. I have one shot at it. I was born, and God smiled, and I was born again. And I'm in pursuit. Now, like a marathon, sometimes you get a ding, sometimes you even fall down, sometimes you go slower because you go uphill, you downhill. But I'm telling you right now, I am not turning around. And here's the cool part. In the ascending realms, right? Like if you ever climbed anything in your life, it's way cooler to go up. And like if you got a raise, you don't want to not get a raise. If you go up into a mountain, you want the top view. You don't want the bottom view. It's not nearly as exciting to go down, right? And there's a point in a race where you're past that halfway point. And then you got to decide, baby. You got to decide. Watch, I'll put it in practical terms. All I ever wanted to be, like when I started to make plans for my future, right, before I was saved, all I ever wanted to be an actor. That's all I ever wanted to be. I had great encouragement, great support. Like, I really enjoyed that. But then God put something in my heart. And and he's blessed me, right? Like he blessed David. He blessed David, yet it's not this, though. You understand what I'm saying? We're not living this. Not even close. Yet there's a faith deep inside us that pulls us, that tells us, no, don't stop running now. Don't stop running now. Now is not the time to stop. How do you know? I don't know, but I'm not stopping. I'm not stopping. And this is how, this is the cool part. This is where we are. This is where it starts. In my distress, I cried unto the Lord, and he heard me. This is one thing that is common, this is Brother Warnock's voice, that is common in this day and hour concerning the people who have caught a vision of the holy city. Hallelujah. And who have heard the call to come up higher. And when we hear that call, let us be prepared. You ready? You ready? To go lower. Don't get mad at me. This is not even me writing this, okay? Just don't get mad at me. For this is God's way of bringing us higher. God's people are knowing all manner of distress, frustration, perplexity, sickness, and calamity of one kind or another, strange dealings of the Lord. Be encouraged. I'm sorry. This is Brother Warnock now. This is but the first steps. Come on, man. And then for us, it's really this. Do you want this thing or no? God's not going to beg us to do anything. You know why? Because when I keep saying this, man, I encourage myself in this all the time. He said, John 13, I give you a new commandment. I took care of all the others. I give you a commandment. Love one another, even as I have loved you. And once he signed off on that, it is no longer up to him to keep it. Therefore, I conclude that there is a people that will keep that commandment. I love that. You should love that. That's awesome. And then, all the disciples were like, is it me, Lord? Are we going to betray you? But for me, I don't even want to ask the question, Lord, am I part of that group? Oh, no. I'm like Caleb. Like Caleb, boy, I'm coming. I'm going, I don't care. Well, you'll never make it. Doesn't matter. There was this cool movie. It's called, I think it's called Gattaca. And it's, again, I want to talk about love here. There were two brothers. And one of them was engineered, right? And they had like this gene therapy. It's like a sci-fi movie. And the other one was like the old school birth guy. And they were brothers. And they would race in the water. Again, I'm talking about desire and worrying. And like Paul said, forgetting those things which are behind. Just it doesn't matter. Just like David, just go. Don't overthink this thing. Just go after him, right? And these two brothers, and their challenge to each other, their competition was in the night, they would go on the beach and they would swim out into the ocean. And the one who wins would be the one who is willing to go further into the ocean. And the guy who was born like regular, not engineered, and they were both good guys, he would always win. And at the end of the movie, or at some point, he said, "Do you know why I always beat you?" And he's like, "No, why?" "Because I never planned for the way back." You got to be committed. You know, we have our 401ks and stuff. Because see, really, what we really are, there's nothing like this in the earth today for God's people. Not in the natural there isn't. But again, I contend, this was in the natural. Ultimately, what God's doing is going to be manifest in the natural. Now, it may not look like this, but he has something prepared that's better. Or else, why would he express himself these ways? Why would God's people have 2 legs, 2 feet, 2 arms, 2 eyes, 1 nose? In his image, he made man in his image. And man screwed up. And we look in the mirror, we fix our shirt, and we fix our belt. Right? That's right. But God has something in mind for mankind that mankind is not able to comprehend. Yet he gave us a command, love one another. How do you do it? Love one another. Pomegranates. Abiding places in the temple, and then we'll stop. That would be good. And this is kind of what we've been talking about. There's abiding places. It's an ascending realms principle. There's also abiding places in this temple. Him that overcomes will I make a pillar. And this is the note that I just shared. Prominence, critical, strong, example, prime time. It's not hiding in a corner somewhere. It's a pillar. It's a structure. It's something like you ever see where what's that building where President Lincoln's statue is? Right? All these columns, right? Every temple that was ever built, there's columns. It's for show, baby. It's to show you, like, boom, this thing is the best. That's what God's doing. That's what he's going to do with the overcomer. And later we'll dip into what they mean. I mentioned it before several times. Boaz, Yashin. Right? Boaz, he's able. That's his nature. And Yashin, he will do it. Right? He promised, he's able, and he promised. This thing is going to happen. So every time anybody's looking at it, this is what you're looking at. It's going to happen. And there's another picture, and we don't need to do it, Caleb, but it's just when you walk into the Holy of Holies, it's all gold. It's all gold. That sounds ridiculous. But that's how God rolls. It's all good. And nobody can touch it. Nobody can take it away. There's abiding places. He's a rewarder, right? He's a rewarder of all those that diligently seek him. And he shall go out no more. That's Revelation 3:12. Paul tells us that we are to grow unto a holy temple in the Lord. That's Ephesians 2:21. The temple faced the east like the tabernacle of old. These are Brother Warnock's thoughts again, and we'll end there, guys, okay? The tabernacle of old. For God wants us to be constantly anticipating the dawn of the new day and the rising of the sun of righteousness. Surrounding the temple in the north. I mean, honestly, though, is that how we, like, God's constantly showing us that whether we live or die, that is how we have to trim the wick of our spirit. Rejoice. Rejoice. He's given us a name above every name. Choose the name. Choose the name. Surrounding the temple in the northwest and south, there were chambers attached to the temple walls and linked together with a system of galleries and staircases. These chambers were in 3 stories. Which one entered on the south and then went up by the winding stairway into the 2nd floor, and from the 2nd floor into the 3rd floor. And Jesus said, in my Father's house are many mansions, or literally abiding places. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a mansion for you. That's John 14:2. The word mansion in verse 2 is the same as the word abide in verse 23. He who keeps my word, love one another. That's the word that he just gave in John 13. These chambers were in 3. Let me finish that in case you don't remember. It says, he who abides in me, my Father and I will come. These chambers were in 3 stories because the true temple above and yet to be manifest in the earth is also in 3 stories. Paul, on one occasion, was caught up into the 3rd heaven. And so we will stop there tonight. Next week we'll do Holy of Holies in the upper chambers. That's really a cool one that we're going to look at, the upper chambers. I almost feel like that's the highlight of the study for me. So we'll do that, and then we'll dive into the cherubim of glory, the 2 brazen pillars, the brazen sea, and then we'll move on. We'll move on from this structure. Because really, this is the thing, as sad as that may be, there's something better. Because really, it's this. We're not really here. This is not where God's people are right now. The real flock that's after God's heart, for real, is in a cave. And here's the thing. You know how when David walked around, he picked up folks along the way? There's yet those that will have to go into the cave. And here's the thing. The cool part about that, and I've said this before, his family ended up in the cave with David. Because guess what? When your name is David, Mr. and Mrs. David's dad, Mr. and Mrs. David's brother, and the world system knows that, you're not safe. But you could always go back to his place with Jonathan, but we know how that ends. And see, I remember Papa talking about this when we were setting up the Christmas tree. And I was saying, you know, why do these Christians, I was a young Christian, I'm like, why do these Christians, right? So what I was saying is like, we're all supposed to be on the same team. Why are they bad-mouthing you? I don't get it. And he's sort of like how he used to, sometimes he would always do this to me. He'd sort of veer off the subject. And he said this, he goes, Nikita, you know all these churches, all these folks that are gathering right now, and I'm paraphrasing, that don't have the Word, that it's really not founded on the Word, when the fire really goes out, and it starts to really affect the environment, and God's people begin to feel the pressure, all of that stuff will crumble. And what he actually really said is the flock will go after the people, they'll go after the pastors. You know, we have the Word. We have the Bible. God's given us the Word. He's given us the Word. The Word works. It really does. It works. Yet people ignore that every single day. But Lord, help us, Lord. I didn't mean to be negative, you guys. I wanted to encourage us to believe, really. Provoke one another to good works, right? We have a promise. We may not articulate all these things perfectly to one another, but I thank Him that He's given us a place to gather, that He's furnished this house a certain way, and that He's not done with us. Like, I don't feel it I have no regrets. Sometimes I tease myself about not joining the military. That's my only regret. But even through that, I understand that it was God's hand. And even that, the point is, none of us guys should be looking back. Not last week. Only for reference, right? Only for reference to make sure maybe we don't repeat the same mistakes. Right? Kind of like when, let's say your toaster sets on fire, you make sure you unplug it and inspect it, but it can't hurt you no more. You see what I'm saying? But forgetting those things which are behind, pressing on towards the mark. There's only one mark. There's only one mark. There's only one way to do it. Hallelujah, Lord. We thank you. Keep us safe. Bring us together again on Sunday. We love you. We appreciate one another. We really do, God. Help us see what you're really doing in our hearts, God. Encourage us, oh God. Fill this house, oh God, with your presence, oh God. Not that we would have a Hakuka Mashai, whatever that thing's called, but Lord, that we would really begin to perceive with our eye, with our spiritual eye, Lord God, that gold, that glow of the temple. In Jesus' name, amen.
Can I say something?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes, no, go ahead.
We had to make some slight changes to the cleaning calendar, so I know that you probably not their calendar, and that may be a change, so you guys check it.
So cleaning calendar,